Week 1 is finally here. That means it is time to get into some good old stardom sit-em. I'm going to be giving you my starts of the week players that could really be gems in Week 1. Plus, I'll be giving you some names that you should probably keep on your bench this week. But first, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any fantasy football questions or comments, put them in the comment section, and I will answer them in the comment section. If it is a question that I can answer before the next video, I'll answer it on the next video. But if it's more of an urgent question that needs to be answered before Thursday night or the Sunday games, I will let you know that I will answer it in the comment section. So be sure to use that comment section. Before we get into today, we do have a little bit of an announcement as a channel. We are going to be having, hopefully, in the next couple weeks, we're going to have a name change. Those of you that are subscribers, you know, as you can tell, it's just my name. I'm going to be switching that over. We're going to extend the name. My name will still probably be in it. I'm still working out on a couple potential names for the channel, but it's probably going to be kind of a long-winded name. It's probably going to have to do, because half the year, of course, it's going to be fantasy football. Other half of the year, it's going to be NFL draft. So it will probably be Andrew Wilbar, fantasy football, and NFL drafts. There'll be a little bit extra added on to the end, but you will still probably recognize what the channel is. So don't freak out, like, you know, what happened to this guy and stuff? Did he leave the station? No, we may have a little bit of a name change in the next couple weeks. So that's just to make sure that you all are aware of that. I'm trying to look at different ways to potentially grow the station. So looking forward to seeing what will happen with that. But to Week 1, stardom and sit-em, you can go out and check Michael Fabiano, who in my opinion is the best fantasy expert out there. He is famous for a stardom sit-em. He always does a great job with this. I'm going to give you my own starts and sits for the week. I'll give you, I don't know, probably about 7 or 8 or so of starts, then sits. Plus I'll give you some sleepers to watch for this week as well. Some potential waiver wire pickups that you can get, especially if you were in an early draft and they still may be available. There's several players that we need to get into, so we will start at the top with my starts of the week. And a couple of these players are players that I'm not particularly high on this year, but I'm going to start off the stardom for the week with Marlon Mack. We'll start off with the running backs. Marlon Mack. He's going against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars last year were 3rd worst against the run in fantasy football. And they didn't really get any better. Of course, they lost Yannick Ngakoue. We'll see if Josh Allen becomes an even better player. Of course, they still have Miles Jack. They still have some pieces at linebacker. But Ronnie Harrison, he also helped come down and play the run. They just traded him to Cleveland. We know the Jaguars are going to be terrible. And we know that the Colts, even no matter how bad Phillip Rivers may be this year, the Colts should still be able to get ahead early in this game. Marlon Mack is listed as the starter on the Colts depth chart ahead of Jonathan Taylor. I have Jonathan Taylor in a couple of my leagues. I know my main one, I'm not going to start him probably just because I don't know what his workload's going to be. So I would definitely say Marlon Mack is an excellent start this week. Any running back in that backfield has a chance to go off. I think all of them will have opportunities, but if one of them takes it to the house, I think they'll just go with the hot hand. But for Week 1, I think Marlon Mack is the safest pick in that backfield. I'd wait on Jonathan Taylor till at least Week 2 or Week 3, see what his role is going to be at the beginning of the year. But Marlon Mack, a great matchup against the Jaguars, should be able to get you a very solid outing. Now, this is an interesting one. A lot of people are saying to bench the Bills running backs this week. I actually am saying to start Devin Singletary. You won't see this on a whole lot of other channels when they're saying, you know, in their terms of starting players and sitting players. The Jets last year, they were actually decent in the run last year. That was their strength. They played well against the run. Of course, they have C.J. Mosley. They have Quinnen Williams. They have players that can stop the run. However, the Jets, I believe in this Bills defense, and I believe this team is going to be more of a first-half team this year. They started off slow in a lot of games last year, had to come back. I feel like this year the Bills are going to be able to get out to a quicker start, which means they will be able to run the ball more. Plus, Stefon Diggs, of course, being the number one receiver there. John Brown, of course, both of them can be deep threats for this offense. I think they could have really nice years. But I believe at the beginning of the year, you're going to see a lot of check down passes across the entire league, not just with Buffalo, but across the entire league. So if you look at pass catching backs like Devin Singletary, James White this week is a really nice play because of the injuries in the backfield with Damian Harris and Sony Michel. James White could be a really nice play this week. There's a lot of these pass-catching running backs, not even in just PPR leagues, and non-PPR leagues as well, can get you a very solid outing. I am really high on Devin Singletary this week to get you at least a solid outing. And again, the reason I'm not high on him is because of Zach Moss. I like Zach Moss better. I think he's a patient running back, reminding me of Le'Veon Bell. I'm not going to repeat myself more. If you've watched my other videos, you've seen who I've compared him to in his running style and stuff. But at the beginning of the year, he's not going to be that workhorse back. He's been battling a little bit of an injury, which is nothing new for Zach Moss. But Devin Singletary, I believe, will start off the year like he did last year as the hot-hand running back that Sean McDermott is going to go with. So those are the two running backs that I think you should really pay attention to. We're going to go to two quarterbacks here. I should have done the quarterbacks first, but anyways, the first one is Carson Wentz. And pretty much, we've already talked about the Jaguars. If your team is facing the Jaguars or possibly the Raiders or the Jets or the Bengals or the Washington football team, I caught myself. If you are playing against any of those teams, stack your lineup with those players, okay? Those are going to be the worst defenses all year. Now, Washington's front line did get better, of course, with Chase Young, and they already had one of the better defensive lines. Hopefully, they can get over the top this year, but they have nothing at linebacker, not a whole lot at corner, almost next to nothing. They have Ronald Darby, who's coming off an injury, former Philadelphia Eagle. Kendall Fuller came back. He'll be playing more in the slot. Fabian Moreau, Greg Stroman, but they don't really have anybody there. And the Eagles receivers, they have had some injury problems, but I do believe that Jalen Reagor, DeSean Jackson, they should be ready to go for week one. We'll get to DeSean Jackson in just a minute. But I definitely believe Carson Wentz is poised to have a top 5 week. Week one, he'll finish in the top 5 of fantasy quarterbacks. The other quarterback that I think is a good start is Jimmy Garoppolo. Of course, the Arizona Cardinals were garbage on defense last year. I know the addition of Isaiah Simmons should help them. They have Chandler Jones on the front. And, of course, they have Budda Baker, who they just signed to a huge contract on the back end. And hopefully Patrick Peterson has a better year than he did last year. Not that last year was horrible, but with the suspension, started off a little bit slow. Just wasn't the same Peterson that we had seen in years past. I believe that Garoppolo is poised for a good week, no matter what, when it comes to the health of Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk seems to be playing very well. I think he can step in week one, step in for a couple weeks. I believe the running backs will get involved in the passing game a lot with Jerick McKinnon. He could be a sneaky play this week in PPR formats, especially if you're in a rare 2 PPR format. McKinnon is actually a guy that you may want to consider starting if you're in a deep league. But nonetheless, I believe Jimmy Garoppolo is poised for a good week. Arizona's defense isn't that difficult. And we've seen Garoppolo get off to hot starts to the season before. So definitely low-end QB1 for this week. I think you can afford to start him, especially in 2 QB leagues. He should be a starter for sure. There's 2 receivers and 1 tight end we'll get into before we move on to the sit-em part of this. For the receivers, I have DeSean Jackson, who we mentioned a minute ago. He exploded in week 1 last year. I'm not sure if it was against the Redskins or Washington football team now, the Redskins last year. I want to say that was who they played last year, week 1, and he exploded against them. But apparently Jackson's looked really good in camp, shown a really good rapport with Carson Wentz. So I don't know what the health will be. I don't know what the receiver room is going to look like at the end of the year. But right now DeSean Jackson looks healthy. Right now Carson Wentz looks healthy. So I'd say trust that duo while they are together, whether that be for 2 weeks or 12 weeks. We really don't know whether they will both stay healthy, but for week 1, I believe both of them are really good starts. DeSean Jackson has wide receiver 2 upside, maybe even low-end wide receiver 1 because we know the explosiveness that he brings. But I would trust him as a flex option. I believe there's a lot of good wide receiver options out there this week. One of the other starts I wanted to get into is DJ Chark, The Colts were one of the worst last year against the pass. They dropped Pierre DeSean. I'm not sure who's going to be covering him. They brought in a corner this offseason. They drafted Rock Ya-Sin last year. We'll see if he matches up against Chark some. But there's still a lot of moving pieces on that defense, and especially in the secondary. Just not super sure about right now. And, of course, if you look at Jacksonville's running game, they just traded Leonard Fournette. Chris Thompson will probably be the lead back for Week 1. Raquel Armstead is on the COVID list. So Chris Thompson is not going to be taking a huge workload as running the ball. So they're going to be throwing a lot. We know Jay Gruden wants to throw the ball a lot. So I believe DJ Chark is going to get a gazillion targets this week. I believe he'll turn enough of them into catches and possibly a touchdown. So I definitely think he has a very good shot at being a wide receiver 1 for you this week. The tight end. Now this is a shocker because I was saying do not draft Hunter Henry no matter what you do. But Week 1, I think Hunter Henry is not a bad start. The Bengals are their new linebackers getting acclimated into the new offense. Of course, Akeem Davis-Gaither and Logan Wilson, 2 promising young linebackers. Of course, they already had a guy that drafted a couple years ago. Still have a lot of young pieces at linebacker. Nothing really proven. And, of course, we know the rest of the Bengals' defense isn't that exciting. They didn't do a whole lot to fix it. They really focused on the offensive side of the ball. The only thing they really did was bring in Andrew Billings, which isn't going to affect Hunter Henry's production. I wouldn't be surprised if Jesse Bates lined up against Henry, but I believe Henry can use his size as a mismatch in that situation. It's just whether Tyrod Taylor is going to feel comfortable throwing it into traffic or not. That was the reason why I was a little bit hesitant to draft any Chargers, because the receivers are not built to the liking of what we've seen Tyrod Taylor do in the past. However, I do think Tyrod Taylor is not a bad play in QB2 leagues and 2 QB leagues. But Hunter Henry is a guy, I think he can be a tight end 1 for you this week. I expect him to be able to get a touchdown. Tyrod Taylor will look for him in the red zone, and he'll cash in for you for at least a couple weeks when they have some easy matchups. But Henry is not a guy I would trust for the entire year. Let's move to the sit-em part of this. Some guys that I think you should leave on the bench. We mentioned Stefon Diggs briefly earlier, but I will mention him again. He is my first wide receiver that I believe you should sit this week. And it's simply because it's a wide receiver on a new team with a new quarterback in a shortened offseason. All of that, I just don't trust that. Maybe he's worked out this great rapport with Josh Allen, and they're just going to explode. I believe their skill sets really match each other. They could really be good by the end of the season. But we don't know. It's so much of an unknown. It's a boom or bust play, and I feel like there's more bust potential than there is boom. So I would probably say avoid Stefon Diggs. And to be quite honest, 99% of receivers on new teams this year, I just think that would be the wise thing to do. Another wide receiver that you can't sit him, okay? You're going to have to take this term loosely. But a guy that I think could be a potential bust this week to an extent is DeAndre Hopkins. And I love the guy. But again, it's the same reason as Stefon Diggs, new team in a shortened offseason. But we know San Francisco's defense. They were the second toughest versus wide receivers last year. Richard Sherman he hasn't played a whole lot against DeAndre Hopkins, but in the little time that he has, in corners that have that type of skill set that Richard Sherman has, kind of that zone type, they've had a little bit more success against Hopkins than more types of defenses that are more man-to-man. So that's just kind of a matchup I'm a little bit hesitant about. I don't think Hopkins is going to be a wide receiver 1 for you this week. Maybe not even a wide receiver 2, because he could honestly bust out. We don't know what's going to happen. Has Kyler Murray really gotten acclimated to DeAndre Hopkins and vice versa? We'll see what happens. But if you have a bunch of other receivers, if you have DJ Chark, I would consider starting Chark over Hopkins. I really would. If it came down to that, if you have a deep receiver group, or if you are in a standard league and you can start a running back in your flex spot, you almost have to consider benching him because of the matchup and the situation I'm just not too comfortable with. But moving on, the running backs, 2 running backs. The first one, should be the most no-brainer, the biggest no-brainer of the entire week for fantasy football. Week 1 should be do not start Leonard Fournette. He just got there, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know how they're even going to split up the carries. They still like Ronald Jones there. They have other running backs in that backfield as well. I believe Fournette will be the lead back in that offense, but they still plan to use the other ones. and he hasn't gotten acclimated with the quarterback. Of course, I don't know if any of you guys saw it, but he put out a comment today. I guess he's saying he said this is the first time in his career that he actually has a quarterback. Now, I kind of agree with that assessment, but I do remember a few years ago when the Steelers played the Jaguars. I remember after they beat us in the postseason, he was talking up Blake Bortles, saying he has a top 10 quarterback and stuff. I'm like, you're such a liar, man. But I mean, he just kind of proved it right there. But nonetheless, Leonard Fournette is not a good start. The Saints aren't an excellent play anyways. The Saints were 5th toughest last year against running backs, so it's not an excellent matchup to start off with. But I would say bench Leonard Fournette, and I would also say bench Melvin Gordon. We saw what Tennessee has done. Jadeveon Clowney, I know he's not an every down player. You know, sometimes he takes the play off. But all things considered, he's one of the better run defenders, one of the most underrated run defenders in the league. We think of him, you know, as a sack guy. Well, it's not like he's been a perennial 10 to 15 sack guy. You know, it's not been every year that he's been able to even hit 10 sacks. Okay, part of that's been because of injury, but also part of his value comes in being able to stop the run. That's going to help Jeffrey Simmons. A healthy Jeffrey Simmons could really help them as well. Vic Beasley, you know, he's a little bit inconsistent, but I believe they're going to use him some on the edge as well. Of course, you have the third-year pro out of Boston College, Harold Landry. All these guys have some ability to stop the run. And you also look at Rashaan Evans, who is an improving linebacker who I think is going to have another really good year. He was much better against the run last year. So I think the Titans are going to be a really tough team to run against this year. And plus, I don't know how many carries Phillip Lindsay's going to get. Is Royce Freeman going to get any? I would just say avoid Melvin Gordon. I think if the Broncos are going to win this game, they're going to be throwing the ball. So that's what I'm going to leave it with. I'm going to say that Melvin Gordon is another guy you should bench. For quarterback, Tom Brady. We already mentioned Leonard Fournette. The Saints, again, they're not a good matchup. Everyone's saying it's going to be a shootout and all that stuff. And I suppose it could be. But I want to see what happens with Tom Brady first. I know the Saints secondary isn't elite, but it's solid. And I always feel weird because I'm always saying to bench Tom Brady. I've always been saying that when he was in New England. Oh, Tom Brady's a bust. But I really do believe for week 1, just not a safe start. All things considered, with everything new in that offense, I'd just wait. I'm not one who likes to start a bunch of unproven things week 1. Go with what you have that's proven, and if you miss out, on a 30-point game, so be it. But at least you played it safe, especially in a year like this when we have no clue how things are going to play out. The last sit that I have a guy I think that you should sit is Hayden Hurst. Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright will be covering him underneath. Jamal Adams on top. This is a really tough matchup. Plus, again, a new player on a new team. I'm just not for it. So I would say bench Hayden Hurst this week. I believe he will be a bust. To the sleepers, I've got a few for you. We've mentioned Tyrod Taylor earlier, has a good matchup. Mike Gesicki, this is a weird one because New England, everyone's saying, don't start players for them because, New England's got a really good defense. Well, they lost Dante Hightower because he opted out. They lost Jamie Collins. They lost Kyle Van Noy. So the linebackers won't be able to cover Gesicki, which Gesicki has too much athleticism anyways. And Patrick Chung opted out of the season as well. Now they have other pieces at safety. But honestly, Kyle Duggar, the physical young rookie safety out of Lenore Rhine, may end up covering Mike Gesicki, and I will take that matchup 10 times out of 10. And, Duggar may be excellent, but, he's had he's been physical, but he doesn't have quite the same agility that Gesicki has. Gesicki has a special type of athleticism and agility that you don't always see in tight ends. He can move really quickly. I'm not sure if Duggar will be up to the challenge, if that is indeed who New England puts on Gesicki. So I actually think Gesicki is a sneaky play. Even though it seems like a bad matchup on paper, I actually like that matchup. A couple other guys that you can pick up on the waiver wire that I like as sleepers this week is Steven Sims, who I've talked up before. I compare him to Antonio Brown when he came out of the draft last year. I like him that much. But if you look at Philadelphia, Darius Slay, I've not heard good things from how it's working out there. Of course, he's going to be covering Terry McLaurin. Avonte Maddox, if they slot Sims on the outside, I think they're going to put him more in the slot. I believe that's where he does his best, or is that kind of X receiver. So Nickel Roby-Coleman, who is new to the Eagles this year, I think this is actually a juicy matchup for Steve Sims. I don't think it's going to be super difficult. Plus, they're going to be throwing a lot. And who else does Dwayne Haskins have to throw to outside of Terry McLaurin? So I think he's a really good play. Allen Lazard, I believe, is an excellent play. We talked about Minnesota, how they've lost all 3 of their top corners from last year. All they have really is Jeff Gladney and Mike Hughes now, and nothing against them. But I think Allen Lazard will be able to beat him. Now, I'm picking Minnesota to win this game. But I do like Allen Lazard in fantasy as well as Devontae Adams. I believe they'll be throwing more than what we expect them to. We expect Green Bay to be this ground and pound team this year. I think Lazard's going to get a decent amount of targets, and I believe he's someone that you can start in the flex if you need someone this week. Another guy is Anthony Miller from Chicago. Matt Nagy just came out and said that he may have had the best offseason of the best camp of any Chicago Bear. And I've liked Miller ever since he was drafted as well. But if you look at the Lions, they have Desmond Trufant and Justin Coleman. Of course, probably Jeff Okudah is going to be going against Allen Robinson. Desmond Trufant, he's old. Anthony Miller is going to play more out of the slot, so I assume Coleman be going against Coleman. Coleman was a little bit up and down last year. I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of who they're going to be lined up against for week 1, because that's really all we have to go off of right now. But I think that it's a favorable matchup for Anthony Miller, especially with the way that the coaching staff is raving about him right now. The last one is Tariq Cohen, his teammate, with David Montgomery, his injury and stuff. Tariq Cohen could get a lot of carries this week. And again, with those check down passes, Mitch Trubisky's going to be the quarterback, so that's another reason to start him. A lot of lower passes. I believe Cohen could be a PPR beast this week and still a viable starter in non-PPR. We're going to finish out these start-sit videos every week with my games of the week. I'm going to show you 3 games. I'm going to give you 3 of my games that I'm keeping an eye on this week, and I will make my picks. I'm not going to give scores this week. Some weeks maybe I will. But my first game of the week is the Packers and the Vikings. I have the Vikings coming out victorious on that end. I believe it will be... I almost want to think of a score here. Being a divisional game, I'm not going to for sake of time. We're running out of time. But I believe the Vikings win that game. One of my other games is the Giants and the Steelers. Being a Steelers fan, a lot of Steelers fans are getting mad at me about this, but if you saw my other Steelers video, I'm predicting the Steelers to lose this week, 24-20 to the New York Giants. Steelers always play down to lesser opponents, especially on the road. I hope this isn't the case, but I'm worried about Ben being a little bit rusty. We'll see what happens. And then my last game of the week will be the Cowboys and the Rams, and I'm picking the Dallas Cowgirls to come out winning that one. I'm not super confident in the Rams. They started off really slow last year without a preseason. Of course, it's even across the league this year. They chose not to start their players in the preseason last year, but I like the Cowboys in this matchup. Darrell Henderson has been banged up. I'm not sure if the Rams will be able to run the ball. But that is going to do it all for this time. I am Andrew Wilbar. Be sure to like this video, share this video on social media, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for watching. We'll have more videos coming up and throughout the entire season. So be sure to stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button so you get notifications whenever we have a new video. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you all for watching.